Up in the next hour, we're going to talk about 2017, getting ready for 2017, making your New Year's resolutions, being inspired to do new things. We're going to talk to a New York Times bestselling author who has gotten people to he has persuaded people to give him all kinds of stuff and his tips for you about the power of persuasion. Jane Wells filling in for John and Ken, KFI AM640. Jane Wells from CNBC filling in for John and Ken, KFI AM640. Okay, folks, are you ready for 2017? Are you going to finally do this, that, or the other? Are you going to make the next big move to achieve your dreams? This whole week, I'm going to bring you stories of strange successes of people who had crazy ideas, but they managed to succeed beyond their wildest dreams with them. But also, this story is interesting to me just about the power of persuasion. How do you just get someone to give you what they want? With me in studio is Joe Garner, who is a New York Times bestselling author of books like We Interrupt This Broadcast, The Crowd Goes Wild, Jeff Gordon, The Dream, The Drive, The Destiny. Really sort of ahead of your time. You were in radio, but when you started to write books, you thought of multimedia. You wanted to incorporate video and all sorts of things, and you were able to ask strangers for help.
Very, very big name strangers at that, yes.
The first one is, because I want to talk about, you have some key takeaways for our audience on how to persuade people. But right off the bat, you decided you were going to do this book along with video. We Interrupt This Broadcast on great moments in news.
Right.
And you decide, I got to get to Walter Cronkite.
Well, I'll tell you what, and the reason that I thought to include the actual broadcast bulletins is because I came from this. I came from radio, and I thought, wow, we live in such a wonderful age because our history is literally recorded. So include the story, the photograph, and the broadcast. But when I was finishing the book, I knew that I needed a name on the cover of that book that really resonated with people in terms of being closely associated with some of the biggest news events of the 20th century. And at that time, Walter Cronkite was still alive. And to me, he was the gold standard and still
obviously,
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I knew of Walter Cronkite, but I didn't know Walter Cronkite, and I didn't know anybody who did. So I did the only thing I could do, Jane, and that was to write him a letter. And I poured every ounce of my passion in that letter and why I thought the book was important to people and why I thought it would resonate with them and why I thought it would be important for his word to be the first in that book. And about 2 weeks after I sent it, I got a call. I happened to be at my high school class reunion back in Central Illinois when I got the phone call from his chief of staff saying that Walter would be happy to provide the foreword to the book.
What was your reaction?
I was ecstatic, and I had the opportunity to work with him one more time after that. I did a book on seminal television moments called Stay Tuned, and I brought him back to do the all of the news events on the DVD, and he was phenomenal. He was just great, and meeting him was like meeting the man on the dollar bill.
But I look through all the people you have asked whom you did not know. Dustin Hoffman,
Right.
Carl and Rob Reiner together. Tom Cruise, who wrote, what did he write, the foreword for the Jeff Gordon book?
Yes.
How did you get Tom Cruise?
Well, fortunately, he was a fan of Jeff's. He did a movie back in the 90s called Days of Thunder. It's where he met his first wife and so forth. So I asked Jeff if I could reach out to him, and of course he said yes. And Tom agreed to do it. Initially, he didn't. Initially, it was, I'm too busy. I'm in London. I'm doing The Mummy, which I guess is coming out next summer or something like that. So I said, look, I've got an idea. How about I interview you? I'll ask you the questions that would lead you to some of the responses that you would want to include in the foreword. And then I'll transcribe it, I'll edit it down, and give it back to you to read.
You're dealing directly with Tom Cruise during this.
In this particular case, I was dealing with his publicist, who was then dealing with Tom because of the time frame. I mean, the time change between here and London. But it got communicated, and the next thing I know, I was given a time when Tom might call, and all of a sudden I looked at my phone, no ID, right? And I pick up the phone. Hi, it's Joe Garner. Hey, Joe, it's Tom Cruise.
Wow.
Well, hey, Tom.
How you doing?
Going?
Yeah.
But he was fantastic and just terrific. And again, the perfect first word for that book.
What is the secret? You talk about there are 6 words you should use, things you need to do. What is the secret to persuading people to give them what you want?
Well, I think the first thing, at least I've discovered this, and I'll tell you what, Jane, I stumbled on this because I'd always been a believer in the worst that people can say is no. So you might as well ask. But obviously you don't go in there just half-cocked. You have to do your homework. You've got to know what you're wanting. In fact, you have to know what you want so clearly that they can feel it. Not only can you see it in your mind's eye, but they can feel it. And the other thing is you have to accept that you are 100% responsible for the outcome. And once you do that and you take on that responsibility, you'll do whatever it takes to get it done, and your passion will guide you. So that's what I did. I said, and the other thing, we tend to want to blame other people. How many times have you said, well, they just didn't get it? Well, they got it. They just didn't like it. Well, they didn't understand. Well, you weren't persuasive enough.
Well, you also have to make them understand why, because. Isn't that one of your words?
Yes,
you need to do this because.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, there are certain words that I found that almost will guarantee that you will succeed in persuading people. And believe it or not, if you use the word because, you've increased your success rate by almost 32%. It's really astounding, but you put the word because in front of the reasons that you're using to try and persuade somebody, and they have to resonate with the person that you're trying to reason with. You've increased your leverage of that reason by 32%.
But where did that come from? Who researched that?
There are all kinds of studies. The study that I like to quote is from a guy named Professor Charles Dwyer. He is with the Wharton School of Business.
Okay, Wharton.
And he said it's he calls it the subconscious processing. Because when they hear that, they hear, well, because he has a reason. I'm a reasonable person. I wish to be perceived as a reasonable human being. Let's go ahead.
So you come into someone, first, by the way, you write a letter. You feel that that's a better chance of getting past the gatekeeper.
How many emails do you have stacked in your...
The delete. I get carpal tunnel from the delete.
Exactly. So I have always been a big believer in a couple of old school techniques. One is the letter. First of all, that letter gets you literally in the door. You just don't receive that many letters these days. And in my particular case, what I will do is I'll send the letter along with a copy of one of my previous books. So now I'm in the door. The other thing the letter does is the letter gives you a chance to lay out your blueprint. Here is what I am wanting to do. And more importantly, here's why I think you are integral to the success of this. And you can usually, if you're really good at it, you can usually convey that reasoning in the first paragraph of the letter, first couple of sentences. So now they know what you want and why you want to do it, and then you follow it up with a phone call. But you've already gotten past the gatekeeper that way, and it's very effective. One of the other words we talked about, because, use the word imagine. You want them to engage their imagination. Yeah, exactly. Well, with Bob, it was,
Bob
I knew he had a passion. Yeah, he had a passion for sports history. So in my letter to him, I said, imagine being able to educate sports fans about these incredible moments for years to come by agreeing to narrate the accompanying documentary.
So imagine, because, write a letter, sell them on why you're the right person, sell them on why they want what they get out of it.
Yes. People do things not for your reasons, but for theirs. And that was a lesson that I was taught very clearly by, of all people, Marlon Brando.
Okay, yes. We're going to close out with this, my favorite story. Tell me the Brando story in less than 2 minutes.
Oh, boy. Okay, well, if I can do that, it'll be a miracle, but I'll try. So I'm doing a book called Now Showing Unforgettable Moments from the Movies. It's the one hosted by Dustin Hoffman. And in it, I wanted to include a clip from On the Waterfront. It's the one that we all know. It's the back of the taxi cab scene between Marlon Brando and Rod Steiger.
I could have been a contender.
That's exactly right. Was that a clip we just played? No, that was you.
No.
So anyway,
could have been somebody.
Rod Steiger was deceased at the time that I was working on the book. So it was a simple process of going to SAG and making a prescribed payment. But Marlon Brando was still very much alive and living in his compound high above L.A. on Mulholland Drive. And I was instructed to address this directly to him. So I composed my letter explaining why this clip was integral to the DVD accompanying the book, sent it on up to him. And then I waited the obligatory 3-5 days, followed up with a phone call. I'll never forget it. His assistant's name was Anita, and I'd call up and say, Anita, it's Joe Garner. Just checking on Joe, I know it's on his stack of things to do, but he hasn't gotten to it yet. Wait another couple of days, and I'd call back. And there's an art to that. You cannot become annoying or you get shut down. But so you just sort of ingratiate. Finally, after numbers of these calls, and then I wanted to sort of get them on my side. And I said, my publisher is beginning to get concerned that we're going to make the date. And she said, Joe, your publisher's concerns are irrelevant to Mr. Brando. He'll get to it when he gets to it. Now, I know this isn't politically correct, but I saw a picture of Brando, and I noticed that he looked as though he, enjoyed his food. And so I thought the quickest way to this aging icon's heart is through his stomach. And I had just received a nice big box of chocolate chip cookies.
I'm going to stop you because I want to finish the story after the break because it's worth. I don't want to rush you through it. It's worth it. We're going to continue talking with Joe Garner, New York Times bestselling author, about the power of persuasion. Jane Wells from CNBC filling in for John and Ken. KFI AM640, Jane Wells filling in for John and Ken this week as we continue to talk about getting ready for 2017 and making your resolutions happen for once. If you're going to do something big, you want to ask for a raise, you want to move up to another job, you're going to go interview. How do you persuade someone to give you what you want? You have to make sure it's what they want too. You have to convince them of that. And joining me again is Joe Garner, a New York Times bestselling author who has managed to convince just about everyone to give him whatever he wanted, including for a book on sports, which he had accompanying DVD of some of the greatest moments in sports. He got all of the major leagues to give him permission to use their footage, which, if you don't understand, people, that is an impossible task. I don't even know how you did that. But I want to go back to the Marlon Brando story. So for people who didn't catch it, you were doing a book on greatest moments in film.
Yes.
And you wanted to use the classic scene from On the Waterfront, and you needed Brando's permission to use the clip. You wrote a letter. You were following up with phone calls. You were getting nowhere. His assistant said, you're telling her, I got a deadline. And she's like, we don't care about that. How did you finally get Brando to sign off?
Well, as you pointed out, he, in his latter years, became rather large in size. And I think that was obviously due to a very healthy appetite. I had received a couple of weeks earlier what I thought was a long stem box of flowers. But when I opened it up at the end, they were hand-size chocolate chip cookies. And all of a sudden I thought, that's the way to this aging icon's heart is going to be through his stomach.
Oh, you cruel man.
So you
killed him.
God forbid. So I called my assistant in the room, and I said, we were here in Burbank, actually, and I said, I want you to find the finest bakery that you can. And there's a very old bakery here in Burbank, wonderful. So I said, I want you to have them bake up the best batch of chocolate chip cookies that they can. So while the cookies were being made, I sat down and hand wrote a letter to Brando, hoping to convince him why it was so important to have his scene in that film, and that the book would not be complete without the inclusion of that scene. When the cookies arrived, I put the letter with the cookies and had it messengered up to his compound. Next day, I called up and I said, Anita, it's Joe Garner. And before I could get another word out, she said, must have been the cookies. Mr. Brando signed your release. So, the moral to the story is be willing to do whatever you need to do. Package it in it, be creative, and know that you may have to buy those chocolate chip cookies in order to get what you need.
You have sort of a boyish naivete.
I say the good Lord looks out for the ignorant and the persistent.
Does that help you, the fact that you're just sort of wide-eyed and just ask?
That's very sweet of you to say, but I have always believed in just asking for help. I mean, it's funny, Jane, when we're little, we're masters at it, right? We ask, Mommy, can you do this? Daddy, can you read this to me? And then we reach a certain age, adolescence or what have you, and what are we told? Asking for help is a sign of weakness.
See, I think that's a guy thing. Women have no problem
perhaps,
asking.
And you're probably right. But what I did was I was doing an interview much like this one time, and a total non sequitur. The personality on the radio said to me, Joe, what made you think you could get Dustin Hoffman or Marlon Brando or any of these people to cooperate? And Janie actually had me stumped. And I paused for a while, and all of a sudden I thought, it just seemed right. I mean, I thought, why not? I mean, I'm not asking them to do something that they wouldn't be interested in, and the worst that they could say is no. And so I started thinking about that one day, and I kind of reversed engineered where I may have first gotten that notion.
Yeah, was you a kid and this was happening?
I was. And I realized I was 9 years old. And I was living in central Illinois. And at that time, I thought I was destined for a career in show business. But I was about as far away from Hollywood as you could get in the cornfields of central Illinois. My father worked for Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance. Every year, there was a convention, and they would hire big-name talent. And keep in mind, this is 1969. And there probably wasn't a bigger name on the planet at that time than Bob Hope. And for whatever reason, in my 9-year-old logic, I needed to meet Bob Hope, and somehow that was going to further my career. I sat down and I wrote a letter to then president of Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance, a guy named Francis Ferguson, my poor parents. But fortunately, I had parents that didn't, try and squash us and just let us do it. So anyway, wrote the letter, and sure enough, about a week and a half later, I get a response from Francis C. Ferguson, president of Northwestern Mutual, saying that he would be happy to help me realize my goal. And to this day, I have the picture with me and Bob Hope and my dad, Cape Chod, standing behind me. And it's an inspiration. But just imagine the power of that experience on a 9-year-old. And so now, all these years later, it's really helped me, and it helps me help other people. Because really, truly, as we're looking towards the new year, not that any day or week or month isn't the appropriate time to take that first step, but imagine now we're looking at the new year, it's symbolic. Take that first step. And that's what my team and I try and help people do.
So just ask, make the case why you're the right person, make the case why they should consider themselves essential, because,
engage their imagination,
and use
too.
The word
yeah,
imagine.
Exactly. My first publisher, I'm sure, was skeptical, but I made her feel through the passion what this was all about. And that's why she took the gamble, and that's what can happen, too.
Joe, thank you so much, Joe Garner. You can reach Joe at joe@joegarnercompany.com. You have something coming up in March?
Yeah, for aspiring authors out there. I hear all the time, I have a book, I have an idea for a book. So my team and I are putting together what we're calling an entrepreneurial symposium for aspiring authors out there. It's Saturday, March 4th. Go to joegarnercompany.com. There's a little icon there, and you can find out more about it, and we'd love to have you.
Oh, you got me all pumped up. Joe, thank you very much.
I'm waiting for that book, Jane.
Oh, yeah, I got to go kill some trees to make a book. All right. Jane Wells filling in for John and Ken, KFI AM640.